Good afternoon and welcome to our book talk on An Affair of Spies. Book events are sponsored by the Contra Costa Jewish Community Center, Congregation B'nai Shalom, in partnership with the Jewish Book Council and Diablo Valley Hadassah. Our author, Ron Balson, is an attorney, professor, and writer, very busy man. His novel, The Girl from Berlin, won the National Book Council Award and also a major award from the Illinois Reading Council. He is also the author of numerous books, so you should check them out sometime later today or in the coming weeks. Eli's Promise, Defending Ritterstein, Carolina's Twins, The Trust, Saving Sophie, and a really excellent book, as is An Affair of Spies, a major bestseller across the planet, Once We Were Brothers. Our Jewish Book Council authors speak out of the generosity of their heart. There is no honorarium. And we ask that you thank them by purchasing their book or books, either for your own personal library, an upcoming gift, birthday party, what have you, and for your synagogue or local library. And now it's our pleasure to introduce Ron Balson.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. And thanks for inviting me to the Contra Costa JCC and to talk about my writing, how books came to be, and especially An Affair of Spies. This is the 8th book that I've written, and they are all what we would call historical fiction. So that means that there are 2 writers to every book. One is Madam History. She has been writing for hundreds of years, and then that is out there. That's what happened. That's the facts. And then I somehow get an idea of a plot and characters, and then I weave them into the facts and come up with historical fiction. Why do I like historical fiction, and why do so many readers like historical fiction? And it's because if I can do it well enough, if I can write characters well enough, a plot well enough, something that interests you and that you can identify with those characters. In other words, learn to like them and live with them and hope they do well and all that, or some characters you learn not to like, and they're the evil ones in the book. But if you can do that, if you can get yourself involved in the story, many times those historical events will stick with you a lot better. They do with me. And it certainly works that way in writing a book. There's so much research that has to be done, especially with World War II books, that I have characters that I can put into that, and if characters are interacting with those facts, then I can remember them a lot better. So if there are characters in anyone's books of historical fiction that you can identify with, that you can get inside that story, you can. It's like being there yourself, and you can learn the facts, you can learn the history, and it'll stay with you. Now, this is Affair of Spies is what we're talking about tonight, which is my 8th book. And how did that come to be? and it is so far down the line from where I started with Once We Were Brothers. I didn't, you know, I've been a lawyer for 50 years, and I've been a professor for 25 years, and I always had the desire to write historical fiction, but I never got started with it because I don't know. You could say life gets in the way, but I never really got my arms wrapped around anything, and that is until I went to Poland. My experiences in Poland really started me on my journey to be a writer. I didn't go to Poland as a tourist. I went there on a lawsuit. The lawsuit was being tried in Chicago. It was one commercial entity against another. My clients knew that after the wall came down, you may remember that wall came down, and then Poland was free to enter into commerce with the West, and we had been embargoed from any commercial dealings with Poland. And so my clients jumped on that opportunity because they were telecommunications guys and they could put in telephones where there hadn't been any service or very poor service in Poland, especially in the mountainous regions. And they made a deal with Motorola to go out there and put in telephones on the roofs of people's houses and get the signal that way. And it was a brilliant idea, and the government of Poland fell for it. And but the problem is either my clients say it was Motorola's fault. Motorola said it was my client's fault, and so that ended up in court. And so in trying that case, representing my clients, I had to go out to Poland a number of times. I spent a long time in Warsaw, in Dębice, in Nowy Sącz, a lot of different Polish towns. And I didn't go there, to be a tourist. I didn't go there for any reason except to take depositions and question witnesses and that sort of thing. But I can remember being astounded by the history of Poland. You can't help but run into it. I don't know how many of you have been to Poland, but if you go there, you realize this is a country which was devastated in the Second World War, and it was it was taken over, totally taken over, annexed into Germany. And the second part of it, the eastern part of it, was to be a breathing space for the German people. And it was just a horrible thing. And if you walk through Warsaw or any other Polish cities, you will see memories of World War II. You will see monuments and statues and all that sort of thing. And when I was there doing my work as a lawyer, I couldn't help but run into all those things. And it really moved me. I thought that was really something to write about. And maybe if I could devise characters, good characters, and a nice plot to weave into that historical background, then that would be a setting. And so I decided to write about an ordinary family like yours and mine, a mother and a father and a son and a daughter, and what would have happened to that family if they were Jewish and their town was occupied then by the Nazis. And that book then became Once We Were Brothers. And I was very fortunate with that because that became a bestseller, not only here, but all over the world. Anyway, I I finished writing Once We Were Brothers, and my publisher said, "Well, what do you got next for us?" So they were ready for me to give them the next book and get to work on that. And at the time, one of my sons was in Israel, and he was in the army there, and he decided, although he was going to school here in Chicago, he decided that he wanted to spend some time in Israel, and so he did. He went to Israel, and so my wife and I, we had to go there several times to visit him, and when he got awards and all that kind of stuff, and there, that was another thing. I said, gosh, I'd like to write a story about this, and especially because no matter where you go in Israel, there are always cautions about Palestinians and dangers and things like that. And so I wrote a book about that, and that was Saving Sophie. And when I was in the middle of writing Saving Sophie, and it actually was I was doing a talk like this talk, and talking at the time about Once We Were Brothers, but I was writing Saving Sophie, and I met this woman, this remarkable woman named Faye Waldman. She lived outside Chicago. She's an incredible woman. When she was a child, she grew up in a family in Poland, in Szanów, Poland, which is in like the southwest corner of the country. And her father was, they were a Jewish family, but her father, he was actually a captain in the Austro-Hungarian army, and fought alongside of the Germans at that time, because they didn't criticize you because you were Jewish. But then after Hitler came to power, then they started rounding up all the Jews in Poland, and especially in the town of Szanów. And when the Nazis were coming to Faye's house, her father put her up in the attic, and she was to hide there. She didn't know what happened to the mother and the father and the brother, and she never did hear from them again. But she stayed up there for quite a long time, and then went out to a farm where she lived on a farm, and then she was captured, and she went from one camp to another camp, and finally she escaped from Auschwitz. And just a remarkable story. But as we sat there talking about it, her life, and she told me a part about these, that wasn't exactly hers, but there were two babies that were involved, and that she was involved with, that was a remarkable story about them having to be thrown off a train and then later found and all. And I decided to write a book about that. And I asked Faye, would it be okay to do that? I said, but I can't write a story that's just pure history, because that's a history book, and I write novels. And she said, absolutely, that was fine. And I wrote that story, and that was called Carolina's Twins. So it seems like, every book I write, something happens that leads me to the next book. It's like when I was writing an affair, when I was writing Girl from Berlin, I got the idea, and I was researching it, and I was out in Israel, at Yad Vashem, the amazing museum out in Israel, and saw a story. There's a garden up there, the Garden of Righteous Among the Nations, and they had a special plaque for the people of Denmark, a plaque for the whole people, not just a person. And so I wanted to research that and see what it was. And that amazed me, that story, because there weren't a whole lot of Jews in Denmark. And it's not that big a country to begin with, but there weren't that many Jews. Out of the millions of people that lived in Denmark, there's only 7,600 Jews. But that's a very liberal society, at least it was then, and they all got along really well. But then the Nazis occupied Denmark. They did it under kind of like an agreement that they wouldn't bother them, and as long as Denmark wouldn't align themselves with someone else. And so they did that for a while. But then Hitler, and he got the idea he's going to round up all the Jews and send them to a concentration camp, no matter what. And they were going to do it on Rosh Hashanah, because they knew that the evening of Rosh Hashanah, they would all be home having dinner. And so that word got out. A guy named George Dukvitz found out about it and actually spread the word about. Spread it to the main rabbi and to the priest, the head priest, and that word that was spread about all the people in Denmark, and they got these 7,600 people, and they hid them. They hid them all. And so when the Nazis and the Gestapo came to catch all these Jews and put them in a train and send them to a concentration camp, they weren't home. They weren't there. They couldn't do it. And then people of Denmark hid them. They hid them in their house. They hid them in their hospitals. They hid them in warehouses, anywhere. And then they would take them in the middle of the night in boats across the inland sea to Sweden, where they found safety. And then at the end of the war, they came back. They all met. They were met on the shore of Denmark by all the citizens of Denmark who had kept their house clean and put flowers on their tables and all that. Just an unbelievable story. And so I wrote that story because it fascinated me. And when I was writing that, then I finished it, I hit a wall. I didn't know what I was going to write next. You know, there's an author, John le Carré. I don't know if you've heard of him. He's a pretty famous author. I saw him on TV once, and he said that the worst time in his life, the worst time for an author, was when you finish one book and you don't know what you're going to write next. And that's that is a problem. And when you don't really have something that you can get your teeth into, it's a problem. And so I finished writing my book about Denmark, and then I didn't know what I was going to do next, and then I was digging through some stuff I had from the Holocaust Museum, and I found this letter, typewritten by Albert Einstein. Now I'm going to show you a few slides, and this tells you how I got to An Affair of Spies. Let me see if I can do this here. That won't work. Here we go. There we go. So this is a letter I came across. Of course, the actual letter is in Washington, but this is a letter. It says it was written by A.E. Einstein to F.D. Roosevelt, President of the United States, White House, Washington, D.C. And it said, "Sir," like a kid would in middle school would write a letter to his teacher or something. And it says, "Some recent work by E. Fermi and L. Szilard, which has been commissioned which communicated to me in manuscript, leads me to expect that the element uranium may be turned into a new and important source of energy." So he writes this letter to the president saying that not only is this a wonderful new source of energy, but it can also be the source of a very powerful bomb, and warns the president to do something about that. So then the president, and this is Albert at the time, the president, let's see if we can, there. The president takes this at heart, and the problem was, and Einstein alerted him to this in the letter. The problem was that we were doing the research here in America, but it was disjointed. There wasn't enough money. It was being done at colleges, universities, and it wasn't being organized and coordinated. And so someone had to be appointed to coordinate this. And this is the man that they did, and he was at the University of Chicago, Arthur Compton. And then, let me see if I'm clicking, but it's not working. There we go. So then also, the idea came to me, why not do a story about the race to develop the first atomic bomb? Because we knew that they might even be ahead of us, because Enrico Fermi, who was now in the United States, and Szilard and Einstein and Lisa Meitner and all these brilliant scientists, they were all in Berlin at the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute. And that's where they developed, that's where they split the atom, that's where they knew about chain reactions. And it became a race. It was a race between America and Germany to develop the first atomic bomb. And so I got an idea. Let's write a story and see what we can find out about the race, and to see how we could, and if we could, and we did, sabotage their program. But then at the same time, I came across a story about Ritchie boys. There is a camp in Maryland, or was a camp in Maryland, very top secret. And in the hills of Maryland. And Fort Ritchie was the name of it. And what they did was they took boys who had immigrated from Germany and Austria and other parts of Europe, who could speak that language, who knew the customs, and could be trained to go over with our troops when D-Day ever happened. and by that they could interrogate, they could find out what the patches on the emblems meant, where the different outfits were, and the uh, the the boys who were doing this were called Richie boys, and they were doing this. Now, in my story, I said, well, wouldn't it be interesting if we could get a Richie boy or someone who's like a Richie boy to sneak into Europe and sneak all the way across France and Germany into Berlin, and even maybe into the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute, and find out how far along Germany was in developing an atomic bomb, and what, if any, they could do to sabotage that program. Now, all the things I told you so far are factual. That is all what happened. As to finding somebody to a Richie boy to sneak over, okay, now that was my suggestion. But they did put together a unit of they weren't Richie boys, but they were immigrants from Germany, to go back there and to sneak into the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute and find this stuff out. But that didn't ever happen. That was called the Alsos thing, but that didn't never happen. In any event, this is General Leslie Groves. General Leslie Groves was appointed by President Roosevelt to head up the Manhattan Project. His office was, in fact, in Manhattan on 570 Broadway. Anyway, Leslie Groves, in my story, Leslie Groves takes a Richie boy and sends him over instead of this Alsos group, which he eventually did send over there. And I said, well, that would make a very interesting story, I thought. And really, that's what An Affair of Spies is all about. When you have, we had a Richie boy go over there. Now, in order to know something, what's a Richie boy really, if you think about it? What's a Richie boy going to know about the formulas and chemicals and scientific processes of atomic energy? Probably not too much. They would need a scientist. And so in the story, Nathan Silverman, the Richie boy, is told that he is to be smuggled back into Europe through France, through Germany, and into a safe house in Berlin. And to find out what he can about how far along Germany is in its nuclear program. But he is to take with him a scientist, and the scientist is hopefully going to get into the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute, and that's this Kaiser Wilhelm Institute. In fact, all these people that are now in America trying to develop it, they were once at the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute. It was that far ahead. But he at first, Nathan Silverman says, well, that would be kind of rough, sneaking all the way across France, which is occupied by the Nazis, and Germany, which of course is occupied by the Nazis, and then into this Kaiser Wilhelm Institute with dragging some old professor around. But in my book, it's not some old professor. It's He goes to the University of Chicago, Dr. Arthur Compton, to meet this professor, and the professor happens to be a very pretty girl. It's Dr. Fisher, but it isn't a male. So here's they are to go across France and into Germany and be in a safe house in Germany until they can find out what they can. And then at that point, they are to make it back home. Now, I don't want to tell you too much more about it. What happens between Nathan and Allison Fisher, that is what the story's about. And that's a fun thing. And you know what? That is the fun of writing historical fiction. It's kind of like if you can write a love story and stick it in there. It's kind of like tell the story of Nazi occupied Northern Africa and call it, say, Casablanca. It's like that. So if you can write a nice love story with Nathan and Allison, and then at the same time tell the facts about what's going on with the development of the atomic bomb. That was my goal in writing An Affair of Spies. As to how it turns out, you'll have to read the story to find out. And maybe that's it. So if there are questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you so much, Ron. You have fascinating books that really bring you into the heart of history. While we're waiting for the chat questions, which I hope people will put in, what is your next book about? Have you started one?
I have. I'm a third done, I would say. I probably 130, 150 pages, something like that. And it's a story that I found to be very interesting about the Netherlands, and I have characters that I have created and put into that story. So I think it'll be a really good story. I like it so far.
What time period is it set in?
Well, let's see. It's going to go 1938 to 45.
Okay. So when you write, we just had an author who writes with index cards and puts behind her on a big corkboard all the plot lines and characters. Do you do that, or do you just sit down and type or write in longhand?
Well, whoever this person is who does with the cards on the corkboard, that sounds like a good idea. I just use my computer, and
Okay.
and then I have I get my research and I put clips of things in the research, and when I get an idea, that would be a good idea. Let's make a character who does this and finds out this, and then, well, how do they get there? Well, we're gonna have to make a character for that reason too. And so that's another list I have, but I don't it's not that well organized, I suppose,
But it creates good books, so it's the way you write. There is a documentary on the Ritchie boys, which our local film festival showed several years ago. Is there any interest in making a drama out of your books? A movie?
Once We're Brothers, that has been tossed around now by a production company for some time. Whether it'll ever come to be, I don't know, but they have acquired the rights, and we'll see what happens.
If there aren't any other questions, because you talked a lot about a lot of your books, and of course, An Affair of Spies, we also encourage everyone to buy the book. It's a great read. I've read it, and Ron's other books are Defending Britta Stein, Carolina's Twins, The Trust, Saving Sophie, Once We Were Brothers, and again, An Affair of Spies. Thank you very much, Ron. We hope to see our audience at Israel Fest next Sunday from 10 to 2 in Alamo. And we hope to see you at more author events in the coming weeks. Ron, best of luck in your new book. I'm sure it'll be a bestseller, and we hope to bring you back.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
very much. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.